Okay, conscious of time, I might just get us started as everyone joins. As you're joining and I'm introducing, please feel free to add into the Q&A what your relationship is with first responders and whereabouts you're dialing in from. It's always interesting to see what areas of Australia and overseas everyone's dialing in from. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we are here on the land of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people who traditionally occupied the Sydney coast. On behalf of the Wellbeing Australia community, I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people attending today or viewing this at a later point, and pay my respects and our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So welcome all. I'm Catherine Taylor, one of the directors of Wellbeing Australia, and very thrilled for you to join us for day 2 of our First Responder Summit for 2022. Some fantastic conversations coming through following from our discussion yesterday about Are You Okay and how to have those. So in a moment, I'll hand over to our fantastic presenters to explain their words of wisdom and gold to you. But before I do that, I guess I wanted to share with the dynamics of the world, the floods that we're experiencing, the ongoing pandemic, what we're seeing overseas. Never has there been a more important time for us to stop and refocus on ourselves, particularly the first responder community, which to us includes those in paid and unpaid roles across a whole range of services and agencies, but also the community, family, friends, and those volunteers that are helping as and when needed, which we're seeing around Australia at the moment in extreme proportions. So with that in mind, this summit is really for everyone, and it's really about us starting to see how we can improve our well-being with an understanding of well-being being a broad focus. All aspects of our well-being, our mental health and our physical health, which we commonly focus on, but also those aspects of spirituality, of sense of purpose and meaning, and definitely connection and social value in what we do. The work that we do is all not-for-profit, so we are not connected to one agency or one funding stream. We are independent for that reason, that we wish to provide a neutral, positive, proactive platform for you to be able to support and improve your well-being. We do focus on all of Australia, but we do have a lot of people dialing in from overseas and regularly joining us from overseas, so we welcome everyone. This summit is about you being able to help yourself in all spheres of your life. So you may notice things today where you think, actually, that's really important to me personally, or that relates to me professionally. We ask you to think about yourself from that whole perspective and be able to benefit from that. As I mentioned, there's a Q&A box down there in the bottom of your screen. That is private, so that is only visible to us as hosts, so that you can make sure that any questions, any sharing, any situations that you might want us to address or discuss, or that you're facing at the moment, you can share and we can respond with our wonderful speakers. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our 2 speakers for today, who are going to be sharing with us their experiences and their involvement in what we are referring to basically as our coaching conversations. So this is those informal and formal conversations that you guys are having through and with and during and prior to crisis in all their sorts of forms. So welcome to Commissioner Andrew Crisp, who is Emergency Management Victoria, who has been involved for a number of years. Andrew, I'm going to let you explain more about you, but definitely in a number of areas evolving through that police pathway and serving with the United Nations, Victorian Police and Emergency Management Australia, or Victoria rather. And Trina, who is Executive Director with People and Strategy for RFS, who's been involved in a number of different areas, including that transport, logistics, also education recently, from an HR, from a coaching, from an employee relations sort of side. So the conversation and discussion today evolved from a lot of what we were talking with people about last year, and people feeling there was a need for us to be better at knowing when do we ask for coaching, or when do we approach those we're working with to coach to help people improve their well-being. So Andrew, I might just kick off passing over to you. What's your involvement in the coaching world?
Well, I probably needed some coaching on how to get into a Zoom meeting. I think I would know by now after 2 years. I've never had to put a password in previously, but anyway, all sorted. So, but again, I guess, when it comes to coaching, very, very competent, much younger person than me came in and helped me through that. So I guess, there's a lesson in that, coaching is not always about the top down piece. It's interesting where you can learn from, and there are certainly always opportunities to learn. And I've sort of, I've reflected on in coming into this session, and I actually had, just to go to your point, Catherine, and thank you for the opportunity to join you again. And I well and truly get as much, if not more, out of these sessions by actually listening to people's questions. So I really look forward to that part. But this morning, myself and the CEO of ENV, where I work, we were interviewed by the Inspector General for Emergency Management, who's doing in this state, who's doing a review of the state's pandemic preparedness. So it was interesting with, I'd seen the interview guide, we'd prepared, all our responses, but when I sat down in the chair, and he sort of opened up with his introduction, and he's sort of a friend of mine. I know him well, like he's not intimidating at all, even though he's got the fancy title. But the last 2 years just came flooding back, and the number of reviews and inquiries and media pressure at times and a whole range of other things. And I thought I'd start off the day well, I had a good night's sleep, but it is this piece about what is a trigger, or what is something that's actually causing us to think, I'm not traveling all that well. So in those first couple of minutes of that particular interview, I was feeling pretty ordinary, to tell you the truth. So I don't mind admitting that. But then we got into it, and it was fine. And it's always about an opportunity to improve our systems and processes, the way that we actually work. But yes, the coaching piece, and again, I was thinking about it, coaching, what is it? People talk about coaching and mentoring. Coaching, it's about being better at doing something. You might have a coach for sport or for music, and it's very much the case in the world in which we work. And as Catherine said, whether that's the formal or the informal, and I think when you're in the crisis, invariably it's probably more the informal. It's just that quick opportunity to have a conversation with someone. And then because Catherine, you used the word conversation, and I probably, I'm not a theorist. I just, I talk based on my experience. But when you think about coaching, you do think about a conversation. But I was thinking about times when I've been in the middle of, sort of a major emergency and things are going on. And if we talk about coaching in terms of well-being and making us feel a little bit better, sometimes just to get a text from a peer, a colleague, someone that's not even directly involved, actually makes me feel better, improves my well-being. And sometimes that's on a two-way thing. There's one person in particular, one of my former bosses, who during the 1925s and into COVID was doing that, and he'd always say, "Don't reply. I know you're busy. I'm just checking in, seeing how you're going." So, sorry, there's a lot in that, but anyway, I'm a bit of a ranter and a rambler, but happy to hand back to you.
And it's interesting, though, and I thank you for sharing so honestly, because those are the crises everyone's facing. Technology is a whole world of its own, right? And so for all of us, it has opened this can of worms that we're trying to layer on top of our professional worlds, on top of our personal worlds. And I think that sense of crises, feeling of pressure has heightened, certainly in our first responder community, because it has been coming not just from the workplace, but from our personal worlds and from a global pressure from media and whatnot as well. So it's a really good time for us, as you say, to stop and pause and think, well, where am I at? And what is important, and how can I have those coaching platforms or facilities in place? Trina, you're heavily involved in coaching. So maybe just start us off with, what would you describe coaching as, and what's your role linked to that?
Yeah, coaching a moment ago, we were anticipating Andrew attending, was Catherine coaching through what a song and dance routine might look as it like time. So my mental resilience needed a little bit of bolstering for a while there, but since you're here, we're all good. Thank you. Look, coaching for me, it's a process, Catherine. And I think it's something where the journey is as important as the destination. And I concur with Andrew. It's very much about some kind of personal performance improvement, whatever the matter may be. You're looking to improve your situation. To me, it's very much about the coach not being the expert. It's about the coach facilitating learning. And Andrew, you made the comment before that as a coach or a coachee, you're on both sides of the ledger of learning. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the coaching process, is that you get out of it as much as you get in, you give to it as well. And I think it's also about, fundamentally, in my mind at least, believing that a growth mindset, that everybody has the potential to grow, and you're not there to solve the person's problems if you're the coach. And as the coachee, you're there in that shared responsibility to help find those solutions for yourself with that little bit of assistance, because it's really within you. It's just getting somebody's help to do so. And that's my background. I think, for me, I came to it relatively young. It's going to sound a bit strange, but I'm a sports person. It's kind of, physical fitness is something that's part of my life. And it occurred to me really young that despite how physically fit you are, that mental fitness can get in the way of your performance. And that became very evident. And that kind of led me to be a young observer into that. And then eventually led me into psychology as a profession. For all of those out there, please don't hold it against me. It's a good, honourable profession, isn't it, Catherine, really? But it's one of those things where I kind of felt that mental fitness mattered in life, and I wanted to be able to learn and know about it myself more, and also learn and know some more to be able to help people learn and know some more. And so fell into the coaching pretty early in that, through what was clinical practice, and then moved into kind of the organisational context with emergency service sectors, being, police, now with RFS, and also transport logistics background, and education for a while. Where kind of the new ethos of teaching is about learning and facilitating learning. And so those things kind of blended very nicely.
And it's interesting you mentioned that growth mindset, that I'm not there yet, but I'm continuing to focus forward. And you've both touched on that, not needing to be the expert. And I think that's something we forget. And particularly as we get into that middle and senior management, is quite often we're thinking we're here because we have the answers and people are coming to us for the answers, yet our role is actually to empower others to see it. So everyone in the room, if you can share in the Q&A any situations where you feel you are actually coaching others, so we can tailor some examples and share with you, please feel free. I guess the question would be, how does this connect with wellbeing? So Andrew, you mentioned a bit around that whole, tapping in and knowing where you're at now. How do you see this conversation as relevant to the wellbeing of your staff?
Yeah, so look, it's so important because it is that piece in relation to growth, and if you feel as though if I feel as though I'm not learning, I'm not realizing my potential, and working with others, then yeah, I'm not feeling all that good about myself. I want to keep learning. I want to be inquisitive. It's that, we talk about in emergency management, that shared responsibility. So there's a responsibility on me to look at how best I can do that. And that might be, session conferences, but, identifying individuals that I want to spend time with. But at the same time, as a leader, as a manager, we've got the same responsibility in relation to the people that we work with.
Do you think that it varies when we're in these situations? And at the moment, it's an ongoing. So Trina, maybe I'll ask you that ongoing piece. Do you think that what we need to be thinking of in terms of coaching and supporting people should vary before a crisis, during, or post? Do you think that this ongoing situation we're in has varied how we should be mindful of how we approach coaching, possibly?
I think, Catherine, it's kind of, we need to be more mindful about coaching. I think it's become more prominent. Has it varied? In my mind, at least, the process? No, but I think it needs to be more dynamic, maybe, and perhaps a little bit more in time, or just in time, rather than maybe thinking about it as that orchestrated formal process that we've all come to know it as. Maybe a little bit more kind of in situ, like you say, before, during, and after. But the process itself, or the fundamentals, I don't think have changed. And to me, I think it is intrinsically connected to mental health and well-being, because it's about connecting to others, making sure that meaning and purpose in your life is at the forefront, that you're growing towards that you're engaged in what you're doing, you're connected to your organisation, and that that there's somebody or people in that organisation that you can trust and have a safe place to be able to talk about things that matter most to you. I think it just creates a culture of wellness. So for me, the question is not, is it connected to wellbeing, but how can it possibly not be?
And I think you're right, those layers. So when we look at wellbeing and we look at the dramatic impacts, so the research is showing us one of the biggest things that's hitting people's wellbeing at the moment is that sense of purpose. And it's interesting, I've been profiling people in the last couple of weeks, and that sense of purpose and direction and hopefulness and meaning has really been hit lately. And that is that direct link to why we're there and why we're doing what we're doing. When we look at where we're coming from other perspectives around relationships, those social relationships, but also those relationships that we're talking about that are continuing or evolving, changing platforms. The way we approach it, and you touched on this, Trina, is quite often what we got feedback last year about was there's processes involved. We've got this system in place. We've got this structure to tap into, yet it's not the system so much as the conversation that really benefits. Do you guys have any feedback or thought on that, having been like you're embedded within the agency, so you see exactly how it's living?
I feel like I want to ask Trina a question, but going to the point, Catherine, you made about, a sense of purpose, and I think that's something we have in spades when it comes to our emergency services. So then, does that then work to our detriment in relation to mental health when we will just keep going and going and going and going? So I guess, how do you find that balance in terms of, there is a strong sense of purpose, but at the same time, we really do need to look after ourselves.
I would agree, Andrew. I think, purpose-driven organisations such as the emergency service sector, there's so much to love about them. That's why we're all part of it, right? But there is that caveat or that potential downfall of you find meaning only in your work and you lose sight of the other aspects of meaning in your life. And I think that's part of coaching. And for me, and this is why I think my background of psychology, I went in there because I wanted to assist and help. And I think coaching is part of that. And we all do that in emergency service. That's who we are. So I think it's about making sure that people don't lose sight of what brings them joy and what they get meaning out of, not just the work they do, but the connections they make. And how they kind of make sure that their self is whole, not just about their work. That's a challenge for us because, in my mind, the kind of crisis is almost the new norm. It's so relentless over the last 2-3 years. How do we step back from that and find other meaning and joy in life beyond just that responding? I think that's part of our new coaching challenge.
Absolutely. And just want to mention thank you to those who are sharing where they're from. We do have people dialing in from Queensland who are dealing with the floods. So we really hope that we can be a meaningful pause in your day. And we're very grateful for all that you are doing. Another comment that's come through is that just-in-time coaching that you mentioned, Trina, is a really interesting concept of where. So maybe if you guys could think of a particular conversation you've had, and that may have been you being coached or it may be you coaching someone else, but just what was happening, the timing of it, what happened to positively impact or for you to grow as a coach. How did you approach it? Andrew, do you want to kick us off with something that you recall in terms of a situation you've had?
Yeah, and just on that last piece in terms of coaching in more recent times and around people's well-being, like I don't know how many times I'm sure we've all said over the last couple of years, take a break. Have a holiday. You've got to do something. So, it's not about, we're not even suggesting that it's about building your technical skills and expertise, but in my mind, what I've seen, what I've been involved in, and others that I work with, it's been very, very much focused on people looking after themselves. But interesting. I did share this with Catherine and Trina when we caught up a week or so ago. At one stage in my career, I had 3 executive coaches, and I wasn't sure whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, that people thought I was really struggling or more. There must be a ton of potential here. We'll have all these coaches working with them. But for me, the interesting thing was about the different styles of each of the coaches, and the important thing is in terms of how you connect. What's the relationship you might have with that person to actually draw the best out of you. And with one of those particular coaches, it was interesting because it's something I'm sure you all know, but I thought a lot about this because this coach, executive coach, was actually working with other people in the organisation, the same organisation. And as we know, confidentiality, and I think we've touched on trust, is such an important thing. And I knew from just little things that this person was saying that I wasn't sure that I could be absolutely confident that my conversations were being held in the strictest confidence. So, and I know that's, probably a no-brainer for everyone, but it was just something that really, really hit home to me. The
I think everything's a no-brainer, Andrew. I think it is. It's those little things, isn't it? Because obviously something was said where you went, oh, I'm not sure. Yeah. So it's a really important something that may have been flippant or ad hoc from the coach's perspective that really just planted that seed in you.
And then these were, and I should have made the point, these were all external executive coaches, so not internal. And I'll be honest that where I've tried to engage a more senior coach within organisations I've worked with, I have not found them to be as valuable as an external executive coach. Whether that's just because in terms of it's good for your well-being, just have a break from work. It's someone different, someone you feel you can open up with. But for personally, that's what I've found. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed great working relationships. I've had great mentors and all of that. But when it came to the coaching, but going to your question, of these three coaches, I had the one who really tested me, who really stretched me, who was going through this process of really challenging me about who I was and what I wanted to be. And if that's where I want to be, how am I going to get there? And this was a coach that wanted me to validate what I thought others were thinking of me, and sent me off to meet three of the most senior people in the organisation, and almost put them on the spot in relation to a coaching conversation with me. But that's what I responded to, but we're all different.
And I like that you mentioned there's different types of coaches, right? And there are internal and external, and for different reasons that works. Sometimes we do need someone that's outside that's able to help. I know next week we've got a session where the police are sharing their strategy and support in terms of increasing awareness around skills and those transferable skills to empower us in our career journey. And I think that's something we haven't always done a great job of generally, because we're in crisis mode, we don't step out. And that coaching is that personal reflection and growth and reach, as you mentioned, to help me on where I'm going. I'm sure they're all there for a good reason, Andrew. It's never a problem. Trina, what about you? You've obviously sat on the other side as well, being the coach in different scenarios. So can you share a situation where you grew?
Yeah, certainly, Catherine. Can I just take a moment to echo what Andrew said, and certainly having been on the receiving end of coaching, I think it's finding somebody who will tell you as it is and hold the mirror up, not tell you what you want to hear, is so really critical and important. On the other side, I might give you one of my, they talk about, when you kind of adopt a dog or foster a dog, there's those foster fails. This is one of my coaching fails, I think, so I will share it with you. And it was relatively early on in my career, and it was with a colleague who we were both practicing psychs at the time in an emergency service organisation, and we used to obviously assist each other from a coaching perspective, and they were struggling at that point with some career decisions around, shall I stay or shall I go, and some vicarious trauma that was impacting them. And kind of being a colleague and a friend, my natural inclination was to triage this thing, and I think that's our natural inclination when it comes to emergency service as well. Get in and fix it. I'll just fix it for you. And so I basically kind of jumped in and said, look, I'll take this on for you. This stuff that's causing you this vicarious trauma, let me take that on my workload. We'll do a bit of exchange of activities, and that'll get you out of that. And whilst, look, I don't think it was a complete fail in that it removed the pressure from her at the time, and they were very grateful. It didn't really resolve the underlying issues, and I took charge of that. I didn't empower her to make some informed decisions. Thankfully, she was no wilting violet, so she let me know about that not long after, and we kind of re-engaged in the conversation and worked towards what I think is a growth mindset about her making some decisions for herself. And I think that was my learning. Don't be so eager to jump in and fix it for the person. That's not what your job is. It's to help them find the solutions to their own journey, but be innovative and creative and help them look at all the possible options and turn them inside out, and then support them to get it done. But ultimately, it's their life, their responsibility, and you're there to assist.
And also getting that feedback would have been really powerful, because not only building you as a coach, but obviously having a relationship where they were able to go, that's not helping. The issue hasn't been resolved. So I know you're here to help, but we haven't got to.
It was brilliant, Catherine. It was, again, holding that mirror up and sort of helped hone my craft and my skills. But She's forgiven me. We're still great friends today and we're still in contact. So it's all good.
Yeah. And there's a comment come through from the room that empowering people is definitely what we're talking about. That's where we can make the biggest difference. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, both of you, in terms of we are here to respond and fix. And so our default can be in that space. But if we really want those ripples and we really want to have impact for people in all those levels of their world, we need to empower them to seek out that support and to seek out the answers in themselves, because quite often they do have them. It's just feeling empowered and feeling confident in that. So maybe just to help us understand in the busy organizations that you're working in, and I really do tap back into the consistency of what you are managing on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis. Can you give us some examples of potentially some frameworks that you have to make sure these things happen? So maybe let's tap into the formal structures or formal frameworks you use. What would you share in terms of, I'm a new manager or I'm new to this space and I know I want to give some coaching to those around me? What structure or framework would you recommend? Who'd like to share first? Andrew's nominated you, Katrina.
Tag,
you're it. And I felt like I was too slow. I didn't step back far enough or close enough.
Well, I'm happy to start because, I'm not really a frameworks person. I'm more a gut and experience, but I'll let Trina go first.
We'll come back to you for the informal in a moment, Andrew.
Yeah, sorry. Desperately trying to coach myself off mute. There I am. Look, it's a tried and true framework, but I keep coming back to it. I haven't found anything over the years, Catherine, that kind of sings to me more than this one. And it's called the GROW model. You'd be familiar with it, and people online would probably be familiar with it. It was in the early 2000s, if I get this right, because it's been around for a while, but it's by a fellow called John Whitmore from memory. It's GROW, and it's an acronym that kind of teaches you a framework. It's been expanded on by another fellow whose name escapes me. He put a T in front of it, and that's kind of, it's contextualized a little bit more, but it goes something like this, and I just keep it in my head every time I'm talking to somebody who's in crisis or was looking for that coaching moment. And certainly if I'm being coached, it's in my mind about what's my responsibility here. And it's really simple. I'm happy to send it out afterwards, but it's talking about the topic. So starting with context is everything. Somebody once said that to me, context is everything. What's the topic we're talking about today? What's the context we're in? What's the goal you want to achieve? So what's a clear kind of things you want to get out of this? What's the reality of your situation right now as they are? So what are you facing? What have you tried? What's worked? What hasn't? What are the options that might be available to you? And again, it's that eliciting strengths-based conversation. What do you do well? What have you found's worked for you in the past? It's not from the deficit model. It's about where has it worked for you and what are some other kind of innovative, creative ideas? What have you seen other people do? I love the whole organic. What if you could do anything? What would you do? If you weren't frightened or you weren't kind of teetering back towards safety rather than growth, what would you do? And then what will you do? What's the way forward? The W's for the will and the action. To me, that T-GROW model, it just sits in there in my mind all the time. And it's not sequential. The only caveat I'd say is you don't go through the process. It can be dynamic and you can revert back up and down depending on the conversation. And I probably would just give two more words of I hope their wisdom. There are two ladies that really inspire me in terms of their work around this. And if you do get a chance, I'll happily send some links to some very quick TED Talks on this, Catherine, because people are busy. The TED Talks are kind of 10 minutes and you can listen to them anytime. There's a lady by the name of Susan David who talks about emotional agility. And what I love about her is she really, really kind of preaches, for want of a better word, about the fact that, emotions are a living person's thing. Being alive is part you pay of being alive is having emotions. So don't try and push them away, experience them and help deal with them. And I think the GROW model helps us work through that. And the other is a lady by the name of Carol Dweck, who talks very much about a growth mindset, who very much is about everyone has the potential to grow. Everyone has the potential to find the solutions within them, just help them unleash it. And failures are not a bad thing. Failures are a point of learning. And when you actually are resting with that kind of emotion and that failure, be okay in that moment and work towards solutions for yourself. I might leave it there.
Interesting, because you mentioned that deficit mindset, right? And the deficit approach, and quite often that is where we're at because of just where we're in that space in time, but also our humble nature. But that experiencing the emotions is quite empowering, right? It's okay. And I know in conversations I've had with first responders who have said, but I'm not meant to feel this much. I'm meant to be able to detach from it. Well, we're human, right? We're human. We're meant to have emotions. We're meant to acknowledge those emotions. We're meant to be able to move forward. You've got people in the room who completely agree with you, Susan David as well, very, very big advocates there. And the other piece around Carol's work is that failure, that acceptance of failure, and knowing it's not a complete, that's it, I'm done. It's actually that where I springboard off. So two really key points there. Absolutely. Andrew, did you have anything to add there?
I have heard of that GROW model. Yeah, I do remember that from probably one of those executive coaches, but thank you.
That's probably where it was from.
But it does make really, really good sense. I guess I was sort of thinking about probably more when I was in Victoria Police, an organisation that people tend to stay in for a long, long time, not a lot of movement. And often I'd start a conversation with someone about, so how long have you got left in the job? And so they come up with, it might be 15, 20, 25 years. So, what do you see yourself doing in the future? Invariably it would be some that, I'm really comfortable doing what I'm doing. So, but when you go, well, are you going to be doing that for the next 20 years? And don't get me wrong, that could be quite right for someone, depending on their circumstances. But most people would go, well, maybe not. Maybe there is something more to my future than just this. And so that was just a way that I would then open up the conversation about, all right, well, where do you see your future going in the future? What have you done about that? What might you do? What are those options? Who have you spoken to? Who might you speak to? And then just sort of take it from there. So I guess a more organic approach, but, somewhat of a system that I used to work to.
So what sorts of things what would you be looking for if you were saying, okay, we're formally working with everyone. We've decided, we hear this in organizations all the time. We're having a coaching conversation. It's going to happen twice a year or whatever it is. What would you be looking for, Andrew, to start that conversation to make sure it's meaningful?
It's probably something similar to the VicPol piece, because it's about the value of that person to the organisation, them feeling valued within the organisation. So that's, for me, that's always the starting point, that, people really want to be where they are, working with you, working with that organisation. And then you can just, that can head you off in a number of different directions.
Trina, what about you? What would you be looking at? Assume you're coming in to meet with people, current dynamics that we're working with. How would you recommend we could look at starting that initial, context piece?
Yeah, look, Andrew, I know we had this conversation the other day when we were chatting about this, and Andrew made a particularly amazing point about it is about trust, right? So walking into it cold, you need to have that in mind. So unless you've done a little bit of groundwork, I think, in terms of a relationship with this person that you're going to be coaching, why should they trust you? They need to know that you're authentic, that you're human, that you have a genuine and authentic interest in their well-being and their goals and where they want to get to. I think there's an element of that needs to happen first and foremost before you launch into how we're going to help you work through it. I think that's fundamental. Without that, like all relationships, it will not work.
Which can be tricky for people depending on what their role is or how long. You mentioned external coaches, Andrew, so all of those sorts of aspects. And you did, like, the GROW model does have that element of a goal, an outcome. If we were looking at well-being, and this may be personal or it may be people you've been working with, but what sort of things are meaningful in terms of I'm trying to, so you've asked me where I'm at and where I'm going. I'm in a real struggle space. I feel like the world's hitting me at the moment and I'm really struggling. We've assessed it's not one of those conversations that needs extra support, which is perfectly fine if it did, but it's more about me reconnecting with the purpose piece. What would you guys be saying to help me if I'm going, I don't understand, I don't know what goal I can be setting from that? Trina, I might guide back to you.
Yeah, look, I'm probably going to give you a vague answer, Catherine, which is, without having a conversation with you, it's really difficult to answer. But, my initial reaction would be I'd want to explore that some more with you. Like, what is that disconnect? What's going on for you? Is it, and because you want to know yourself best, is it about this relentless kind of wave after wave that's going on at the moment in your environment? Is it something, you know, that you're really struggling with? I think something Andrew mentioned before, is it about your career? You're looking to transition to something else? What are the things that are really kind of causing you to feel that way and experience that? And then my response would simply be to really listen to you and talk with you through those things one by one and understand, you know, what's impacting, how's it impacting, and what is it you really want? Like kind of, you know, in your heart of hearts, what are you really seeking here? And then again, go back to setting that goal, understanding the drivers and the pressures that are preventing that from happening, looking at the options, and then, you know, being able to kind of track an action plan or a way forward. And look, this, I will confess, this kind of goes back deep into my kind of early days psychology roots around that kind of, you know, that real action focused approach to understanding what's going on for you and then thinking about some ways forward to help resolve it.
What I've loved you sharing there is that it's unraveling. So I don't have to have all the answers, and I shouldn't feel that the pressure is to have this magic wand that it's immediately resolved within one conversation. Actually, to have that conversation and unravel that, yeah, I do need to think more about this, or I do need to work out where I'm going, or I do need to think about how this is influencing me. That's actually a good outcome. So the outcome is that reflection piece, that reconnection, and then starting to get a plan forward. So helping me with that hope and optimism. Andrew, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
Can I just go back with your sort of very general proposition or question about, you know, an organisation is going to set up coaching. So it just made me think about, I remember, and I tried to copy this when Simon Overland was the chief in Victoria Police. His position was about not necessarily working with and coaching his direct reports. It was always the two layers below, which I thought was a really good model that Simon used to do. And then I picked up the same thing. So it's always about, I wanted to spend more time with two ranks below and working with those people and supporting those people. And Graham Ashton was doing the same thing when he was Chief Commissioner at Victoria Police. And I know this sounds quite simplistic, but he would always make a point, or generally, of having a coffee with an Assistant Commissioner or a Commander in a very public cafe where a lot of police would be walking past. And that was just also then, you know, oh, so Graham's having a couple with such and such. Yeah, fine. And everyone got to know, because he was having those coaching conversations, that a number of other people, I'm sure with the right intent, would go, oh, maybe I should start doing a bit more of that. So it's sort of that, you know, that was valuable, but it was also sending a really, really strong message to others in the organisation about what they should be doing around coaching.
And making it really visible that you're not being targeted. There's not a problem here, right?
Yeah.
This is a support thing. So this is happening across the organisation, definitely. What else would you say in terms of those fundamentals? You mentioned that, you know, being at the cafe and making it really relaxed. Is there anything we should be mindful of before entering this sort of conversation around where we hold it, when, that sort of components?
I guess depends on the type of conversation that you're going to have. Obviously, in a cafe where people can overhear, it's going to be a lot lighter and more of a conversation. You know, then you might pick up something from that you might want to follow up later in a different setting. But you know, again, it just depends on circumstances. You know, there can be times, you know, for us, you know, I remember in the State Control Centre where, you know, people are just walking around and you know, there might have been a situation where I saw someone in a particular meeting and they seem to be struggling a little bit. And I just, you know, take them off to a corner, not even into my office, just have a chat, you know, how you going? You know, what have you been working on? What are you focused on? Light the moment. So it's very much sort of, you know, time, situation dependent. And it goes, yeah, as Trina said, that just in time piece, I think over the last couple of years, you know, from my experience, has been so much more valuable than the sit down structured types of conversations.
Interesting. Trina, any other thoughts on that?
I just echo what Andrew says. I think it's largely driven by the person who's looking for the coaching conversations, and it is, you know, kind of topic dependent and sensitivity dependent. But you know, I would take a just in moment time coaching opportunity that's needed, you know, in a little side room, then not do it at all and say we'll set up a meeting next week. So I think it is all about those factors that you bring into play, but it's driven by the individual and their needs.
Absolutely. A fabulous questions come through in just leading on from what you've mentioned there, and that just in time definitely is, what do you guys see are the key differences between coaching through a personal crisis and coaching through an external crisis?
Can I qualify external crisis being?
I'm going to read from what's being shared that an external crisis would be the floods, as in we are managing this crisis that is occurring and that is my job to work through. A personal crisis may be severe mental health issues, family dynamics, breakdown of relationship, things in my own private personal world. That's where I would interpret that. And the person who shared the question is more than happy to give me feedback. Oh yeah, she said it's correct. Yep. Thank you.
Andrew, I might, if you're happy, I'm happy to hand over to you first on this one, because I think in terms of that external crisis and coaching for action, I think there's a fair amount of operational stuff in that.
Yeah, it's interesting how at times you actually can't separate them, how at times they're actually one in the same. And again, my thoughts definitely with everyone in Queensland and particularly in northern New South Wales at the moment. So yes, yesterday, I was at the State Control Centre. Someone came into my office and said, who's one of our functional leads in consequence management, who said, I've just been talking to my sister who's on the roof of her house in Lismore, and it keeps dropping out, and there's no guarantee that SES can go and support her, or emergency services. So there was such a crossover. So it was a point in time, obviously, where I had to stop everything that I was doing and sit down and have a conversation with that person, which was really difficult because, we know how challenged all our services are at the moment in relation to that particular emergency. So there was no sort of magic bullet around being able to resolve that situation there and then. So it was really about, just spending time and then checking back in later in the day to hopefully get some more positive news that, that person had been rescued. And that was the case, in shock, but we're safe and well. So so I'd suggest that the operational side of things, like if you're struggling with something operationally, then it is about hopefully it's that opportunity to sit down with someone that you've got a trusted relationship with, that you can talk through whatever those particular issues are. I'd suggest in the main that on the operational side of things, that people will, they'll work to a script, they will work their way through whatever that operational situation is, but it's where that operational situation has had an impact on them as a person. And that's where, that's generally where the challenges are.
And that was certainly what we shared a lot throughout the information that people shared with us about what they were wanting from the summit, and that I was viewing and witnessing things. I was seeing people who were killed. I was seeing families that were, destroyed. I was seeing these things through my work, but that then did influence back. So it's a really interesting, a fantastic question, but a really interesting reflection there, Andrew, that it's not always so easy to separate and clear those lines because, as I said before, we are human and we are meant to be human. That is the challenge. And so maybe recognizing the comfort or the knowledge of what's there operationally to then give space to think about that personal influence can be something to consider.
And can I just jump in on the operational one? Sorry, Trina. I was involved in I think it's one of the longest running sieges in Victoria, a bloke by the name of Badness, Chris Binns. And, like fired shots, we had snipers ready to take him out, do all sorts of things. And I'd make decisions around, I was prepared for them to do that if they needed to do it. But it was in the middle of an operation, and we were then making decisions about whether we put in gas and what we would do to bring this to a resolution other than let it just sort of run its course. And so operationally, I was pretty clear on the way that I was thinking and working with some others around that. However, I rang someone who was VicPol's like general counsel, had nothing to do with the operation whatsoever, and just to test my thinking with him, but at the same time, him just checking in with me and how I was going. So even in the middle of a very, very intense operation, I think there's still an opportunity to find time, and it was in effect almost a coaching piece, but find someone that's not directly involved that could help support you.
Catherine, if I could just build on Andrew's as well. Look, part of being an emergency service, I keep saying this, but it's so true. The purpose is around serve and protect, isn't it, really? And I think, in the 1920 bushfires, I mean, we talked about it as an agency. Part of the challenge was that, the magnitude of that in front of you, and the same here, I know our colleagues are experiencing with the floods, that magnitude is so overwhelming that the serving and protecting is happening, and you have to trust, and Andrew, you know more about this than I do, you have to trust your operational training and your experience and follow that script as you mentioned, and have faith in that and do that. I think the challenge is that despite doing all of that, life is not perfect and there will be losses. And I think that's the challenge for emergency service personnel. How do you do the job and have this purpose of serve and protect, but also on kind of grapple with and be able to coalesce at some point this understanding that sometimes that won't be possible. And I think the two coaching moments go hand in hand. Know your script, follow it, do what you've been taught to do and do it well. And let's talk about, kind of the impact that it's had on you, because sometimes, despite our best efforts, we just can't achieve everything we want to.
And please keep sharing questions, because there's some great questions I'll be sharing in a moment as well. Very important questions and conversations for us to have. That element that was fed back very much from the breadth of agencies last year was that we were not actually engaging those conversations to say, operationally, this happened, and then emotionally, personally, this is where my influence is. My recall, and Andrew, you were party to some of these conversations, was very much pizza and a beer. That was our solution to everything. And so we didn't have the conversation. We got pizza and a beer, and we pushed it down and we moved forward. And I think that it's wonderful to see so many people like yourselves and Shane, who's our ambassador, stepping up and saying, that's not working. We need to do this differently. And it's okay for us to have these conversations and not have the answers or not feel comfortable and realize these sorts of elements. So I think that's the wave of change is there, but we have to recognize it's a ripple rather than a strong change, and we need to keep working with. A really critical question, and this is definitely something that has come up consistently, is how would you suggest proactively, so taking a proactive coaching model with someone who has vicarious trauma, who has not yet seen it within themselves? Who would like to share for there? Maybe Trina?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to have a go at this one. Look, I'm going to give you maybe an ethos to start with. I think you can do no harm by asking somebody, are they okay? And then being able to have a conversation with them about, look, this is what I'm seeing and I'm concerned about you. And I think, kind of that authentic and that honest and open conversation, again, it relies on a level of trust relationship with that person. So if you don't think you're in a position to do that, find somebody that they trust and respect and enlist their help to do that, and then work your way through that coaching conversation. Because in my mind, the harm exists when you let someone go on with that and you know that it's going to get worse, because that's where the harm or the potential for harm exists for them. It's not your fault, but the potential for harm exists. But you can limit that or minimise that if you actually address it. And so I would find either upfront have the conversation in a caring way, or find somebody who can do that with them through that coaching model.
Yeah, that's spot on. Interestingly, in a number of different settings over the last couple of years, when I've asked someone, "Are you okay?" and invariably, people will come back, "Yeah, I'm fine. Not a problem." And then I've got in the habit of actually following up with, and I'll say, "Come on, are you really okay?" And it's surprising, just asking the question a second time, you get I've got a number of very, very different responses. So it was just something that I found really, really useful. But yeah, exactly what Trina said.
And that leads to a question we've received, which is spot on, Andrew, that it's not one-off. And Trina, that's what you're saying there as well. So if someone hasn't viewed this within themselves yet, it's about us continuing and looking at different ways rather than keeping going through the same process and not making a difference in terms of feeling. We're adding there, looking at it differently and working out who else can become involved. Some of the comments from the room is that importance of being able to check in with people in that heightened moment of emotion and challenge, whether they are public, general public or emergency service, but really taking that then and there approach to make sure we're not missing those opportunities. And being able to start that wave of conversation. Definitely the other question is recognizing, and you've mentioned this, both of you, of people being in rescuer mode at the moment. So we are in that survival space of where we are. And so we're not necessarily aware of that potential influence of trauma on us until later. So Andrew, I think that's where you're suggesting to continue and to approach it differently and at different times and spaces. The question, and we did get a lot of feedback for tangibles, and so you guys are, you are the exemplars in terms of how we can do this. So do you have some specific advice or strategy you would suggest if, Andrew, we had that conversation and we felt it didn't get to where we were wanting and we're worried about that person? What other strategy, approach, technique would you suggest we implement or trial?
Yeah, look, it goes to what Trina just said before, because sometimes it's about checking around with someone else that might have a relationship with that person where they might be able to better engage. So is there someone else? Is there a different setting where this particular person might open up, as opposed to where you might have tried to do that the first time? What about the time of day for some people in terms of when they're prepared to open up? So there's you've just got to keep trying. That's just sort of some of the approaches that I would take.
Yeah, look, I concur. Be caringly persistent. Phone a friend, enlist some help. Look, I think, certainly there are some times, and I've had to invoke this, there are those last resorts where you have had to step in and create a circuit breaker for that individual. But again, you're trying to do that in a way that's empowering them to make the decision. But it's escalating that up into, rather than, are you okay? I really don't think you are, and we need to do something about this. Because it gets to that escalated point where the threshold is too much. You can't just leave it. But again, my ethos is try and empowering them to feel and involve them as if they've made the decision, but create that circuit breaker to get assistance so that they can be in a mental fitness into the future to come back and do what they love, or to make some other choices for themselves.
And I'd suggest come back to the session that we ran with Gary Sims yesterday about are you okay and how to have those conversations. And something he reinforced was the concept of are you really okay, and framing it differently. And so the concept is that, but the language we will use and the approach we will take and that cup of coffee we bring with us will vary. So if you're looking for some more strategies, I'd encourage you to have a watch of that session. Gary was really good in some very tangible ways that you can do that as well. So we will be sharing that as well. So that might give another element of how we can make sure we filter that in different ways.
Sorry, if I may, can I just add one more thing? I think there's a knack too here about destigmatizing it, because sometimes it's also about sharing when you've not been okay. And that's what allows you to see the signals, because we're all human and it's okay to not be okay. So I think there's some, and you would have seen, I think Shane spoke quite eloquently about this over time, and he genuinely means it. He will share his experiences in order for an emergency service person to say, actually, you're right, I'm not okay. So destigmatize it. Don't be afraid to be human and talk about your experiences as well, just to get them to open up.
And that's exactly right, Trina. That destigmatizing is actually us voicing, us sharing. And it's not that I know where you're at, but I have had my own challenges and I'm voicing with you. And Andrew, you were exceptional last year at sharing a lot of those in detail in terms with Georgina of how that had looked in different spaces.
Yeah, I think it's a term that's overused, this authentic leadership, but you just got to be true to yourself. And if you're not traveling all that well, you've got to let people know, and you've got to get some help. So Shane is very good at it. Graham Ashton was fantastic at Victoria Police. As you said, things are changing, but they've still got some way to go.
But I think that's where we have to recognise things are changing. We cannot wait for everything to be perfect. We need to just keep chipping away. and sharing and approaching. So very aware that we are running out of time. Can I ask you both to share your final thoughts on, you've touched on a couple of really key things we probably haven't been able to talk in as much detail with. Andrew, you mentioned relationship and trust as those fundamental elements. And Trina, I know you touched on them as well, but you also mentioned that follow up and that follow through. So asking those questions, reframing those questions. What would be your final suggestions, recommendation to the guys watching this who are going, I don't feel I'm there yet, or maybe I'm trying to do this better and I want to know how I can zone in? What would be your final words of wisdom in terms of what you think?
Oh, yeah, we've touched on this. And Trina said it. You've said it. You've got to be your true self. You've got to build relationships with people. You've got to do that in peacetime, so to speak. So when there are things that, the door's open to have the conversations that you need to have. And, it's hard work, it really, really is, you need to set aside time to do that, to build those relationships where someone will come into your office and just have a conversation but it's a trusted, it's a safe place to do that. It's not easy. You can be looking at all your screens, you've got a ton of paperwork, you've got things going on, but it's all about people. Without people, we haven't got our organisations, we haven't got a future. So we've got to focus on, well and truly, on building those relationships.
I completely concur, Andrew. I think it's know yourself and be true to that. Don't try to be something that you're not. I think it's be human. I keep saying that, be human, except that, part of being human and part of being alive is that we all have emotions. We need to kind of be open to those, and we need to sit with those at times. And we also need to know that there will be failures. And so even as a coach, or you're trying to coach someone, don't expect to be perfect, because you just won't be. The world and life is not, nor are any of us. The only other thing I'd say, Catherine, is you can't do any harm with this, So practice what you preach, go get some coaching yourself, do whatever you need to do to kind of feel like you're confident enough to do it, and then take the plunge. And if in doubt and you're looking to set it up with your team, ask them. Talk to them about, this is what you're trying to do, this is why you're trying to do it, these are the benefits you see. What do you reckon? Please help me put that in place, and collaborate with them on the how to. Be inclusive, because it can't go wrong. If they're involved and they've got skin in the game and they want to do this with you, then it really can only be successful.
Beautifully said. Thank you both. Totally agree. It is that foundation element of really that trust, that transparency. And Andrew, you mentioned that question around confidentiality, and there is a very strong feeling of, but if I share this, what else could be, how could that share on, or what else from there? So really giving people confidence and conviction in that trust, and engaging in those conversations in that respectful way, but also demonstrating the behaviors of trust and relationships. And as you say, Trina, really understanding each individual's way of approach. That's how we can have that influence. Thank you for all the brilliant feedback in the comments. I'm so excited to see so many people recognizing we're chipping away, which is very much what our goal is. So when we started this summit last year, our view was we need to stop talking about the stigma. We need to stop talking about the issues with PTSD. We need to create change. So very grateful to have people like yourselves, Andrew and Trina, sharing and demonstrating that we are just needing to keep chipping away, and there's no one perfect solution. We just need to continue to have that heart and that focus and that openness, and we will be able to create some change. So very, very grateful to you for that. Just as we move forward, what I would like to ask is for anyone, so we'll share a slide in a moment. We will have some upcoming workshops that will allow you guys, if you are wanting some more access to information or resources or strategies of how to do this, you will be able to access some great information there. Dates and information of that will be shared soon. So you will be sent that by email having registered. So we will be having a session with Mark Croswiller around that connection to values and ethics, which will be invaluable for reconnecting with self and really build your coaching approach through greater understanding of yourself and the values others have. that dealing with the stigma and fear of reprisal with Kerry Howard, and that will help us to really regroup with where we're at, but have some very tangible strategies to improve our world in that space of how we can improve. And Graham Bint sharing around how to move past and on from PTSD to create a better space for ourselves. Now, if anyone is feeling particularly in a point of struggle, or those you know are, we urge you to reach out for support and help. Definitely there are resources, there are people, there are places. If nothing else, please message us and we will connect you with people, but do not feel that you are alone. This is something that many people are feeling. We want you to get that support to be able to get to a better place. So feel free to share that on for everyone as well. We have and will share with you a survey link that will allow you to provide some information in terms of how you felt, what you gained from the session and what you may want to hear more about. We ask you to just it will take you no more than a couple of minutes to complete that survey. If you could please do that, that would be fantastic. Tomorrow, we will speak with Katie in terms of being able to reconnect with ourselves and our values. And she'll be giving us a really practical approach to how we can then work from there. So it will flow nicely from today. It may even give you some strategies to understand how other people are driven and energized to be able to see things differently. You are very, very welcome to join all. And as always, if you can't join the live session, you can join it after. So once more, Trina, Andrew, thank you so much for your time and energy. Everyone in the room, thank you for your fantastic comments. We can only help you if you share with us. So thank you for your trust in us and for being part of this conversation. Wishing you all a lovely end to your day. Thank you.